22nd. If you'd like to look those over for any possible corrections or additions.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Made and seconded. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Also in your packet, you should have received the latest copy of our check register. If you could indicate if you've received that. Thank you. Okay, we are at that portion of the meeting for public comments. And as they have signed up, first will be Mr. Doug Moore.
Good evening, Council. Sounds like you got a pretty hefty agenda, so I'm gonna make this short and quick.
Now, we're glad to hear from you.
Instead of bringing this, what I'm talking about is a letter I received from Andrew, the city attorney, about a fence that was constructed that is 8 foot high in a residential area. At this point, I would like to ask or request a meeting between yourself, Mr. Mayor, and the city attorney to discuss my side of this, which I was never able to bring up. Is that something we could do?
We would be more than happy to have that meeting with you.
Okay,
Certainly, we'd be happy to have that meeting.
okay. So just call, email, whatever.
If you'll just leave your number, actually, we'll just write it down. Hold this thing.
Oh, here, I've got a card.
Okay.
And we can do that as quickly as tomorrow or the next day. Make it happen very
you.
quickly.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Next on the sign-in sheet is Miss Lori Saunders.
Hello. I'm going to try to make the season a little brighter. So I'm asking permission to close the roads down on December 1st for our Home for the Holidays parade and the square at 3 p.m. on December 1st. I think you all have all the packets. I've already spoke to Sergeant Bruner. We've worked out the logistics, and I've included 2 or 3 maps in there for you all to see just exactly how the parade route's going to go, and the street closures at about 5:30 p.m. on the evening of the parade. And then, of course, immediately afterwards, we'll have the lighting of the tree.
Okay. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded. Any questions for Lori? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
So Lori, tree lighting immediately following the parade?
Yes.
As you normally do, about 7 o'clock?
We're going to have a big one this year, a big parade. We've already got applications starting to roll in, and we have a beautiful tree that has been donated too, so we're very excited about that.
I saw the tree. It is beautiful.
It's pretty, isn't it?
It's pretty.
Yeah. So it'll be pretty
Lori,
nice.
did I see on the chamber schedule events that tourism is hosting a business after hours?
Business after hours on Tuesday, November the 27th from 5:30 to 7. Hope everyone will come out. We're actually going to be showing a little snippet of prior to the actual preview of the TV show Downstream Liquid Kentucky that's featuring Georgetown in it. So we'll show a little piece of it, a little teaser, and then on December 9th out at Country Boy, we'll actually premiere it before it hits KET. So we'd love for you all to come out for that too, and that's at 2 p.m. So
Sounds good. Thank you, ma'am.
you're one of the stars.
I can't wait. Let's see, next on our list, Jessica Casey and Karen Sames.
Yes. All right. I told her she could sign up, so she's been talking to me about a situation that she has in her neighborhood. And I told her to sign up so that way she could fill in the rest of the gaps. But it's parking is a situation we have across town, and there again, there may not be an enforcement for it that we might need to think about for the council to think about it. But parking in front of mailboxes. She's had in her neighborhood, and actually the lady that lives next door to me, some people have parked in front of her mailbox, and she's not been able to get her mail, and she's had trouble with that. Yes, and so the mail passes on by or leaves a note and says, I can't get to your mailbox. And so she actually called the post office, and the post office told her to call the police department, which actually when she talked to me, I said, you call the police, and because I can't park in front of it. Well, the police just told her there's no ordinance that addresses anything that they can do to that. So I've always been under the assumption we could do something, but for them to give a ticket. But apparently the police is saying that there's not. So,
Police officer told me that the ordinance currently only protects parking in front of your driveway. If she parked in front of my driveway, he could have done something, and went on to tell me he was having the same issue at his own residence, and which there was something he could do to help me. But the mail lady, or mail person, I assume it's a lady, that's a bad assumption, but the mail person in my neighborhood actually left everybody on my side of the street in Falls Creek notices that they couldn't deliver a mail because they recently built several duplexes. It was originally zoned for townhouses. The developer got approval from the planning commission to allow duplexes in between our townhouses. Well, with these additional duplexes over townhouses, of course, you've got more people with more vehicles. And for instance, the duplex that's immediately closest to me, they are parking 4 vehicles for their half of a duplex. So we don't park in the front. My 2 townhouses, we only have 2 vehicles per townhouse, and we have a 2-car garage for each of us and a driveway that'll hold 2 cars, so we never need to park in the front. So recently, 3 or 4 cars have all ended up in front of my townhouses, and I can't get my mail. And when I did call the police officer, he told me there's nothing he could do. It later turned into a bigger issue. I ended up having to call the police again because it turned into a big dramatic thing. So I'm hoping that the city's able to do something to allow the police to be able to help with this issue, because I imagine as we continue to develop apartments and townhouses and duplexes and all those things as the city grows, this is only going to become a more apparent issue for the city.
Interesting. That seems like a reasonable request. We have to let people have access to mailboxes.
yeah.
Pretty simple change to the ordinance.
Well, can we start that process of looking at that ordinance and see what we can change on that?
It might be worth first looking to see if there's a state law that
Okay.
might address it. But
I've
I-
always
otherwise-
assumed, and you know what that does when you assume things, but I have always assumed or always heard my whole entire life that you can't park in front of a mailbox. Maybe it was common courtesy that I was not a law, but I've always heard that you can't stop the federal government from delivering mail, but the post office says,
They told me to call the police, and I called the police. He said I
So,
couldn't do anything.
if you'll
Yeah,
do
help
some
me look into it.
research.
So we may need another tool.
I understand. You may also consider, I mean, currently you've got the support from the federal law as far as the mailbox issue, but you may also look at addressing entrances into people's homes, because the additional thing I considered as somebody who's got a chronic health condition, EMS has had to be called for me before, is this person's also parking in front of the entrance to my home when she's doing this. And what if EMS needs to get a stretcher in my house and they can't because
That's purely against the law, and we will respond to that, and we will not allow that.
I do hope
That
the
one's-
city's able
that
to do
one's
something
clear.
about it.
If we need another tool on the mailboxes, I think we should get it.
Are you talking about the sidewalk that leads up to your front door, for
Yeah.
example? Is that the case, Mayor, or are we talking about a
Driveway.
Driveway.
Driveways, but not.
You're talking about the
Driveways is
driveway.
what I
Yeah.
think the city currently
Yeah.
has an ordinance.
But the driveway would be the access to the sidewalk and then to the.
In her
No,
case, it's not, because,
driveways in the back
In
and
the
the
back.
entrance in the front is the sidewalk.
Yeah.
and they would come
And that's
to,
gonna be for the whole neighbor,
No.
like that whole section of my neighborhood.
yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
And I don't know how relevant this part of it is, but is it a two unit building, or 3 or 4, or how many units are?
Mine has 2 townhouses, and so does the other one on the other end. And then in the center, it got rezoned to allow duplexes, so there are now 12 duplexes in between us.
So do you share a mailbox post or setting?
I share a mailbox post with the 2 that I own.
Okay. So you're
Yeah.
not the only person being impacted by this
No.
situation?
No. And they're getting ready to open about 16 duplexes that were allowed to be rezoned on the other side once they finish building. So if you imagine the influx of cars we're about to have in the neighborhood from that, it's going to be an even bigger issue real soon.
Yeah. So just so I'll understand, because I've had this happen where the car might not be directly in front of the mailbox, but it's close enough to where they can't get their
Right.
service vehicle in. Is that kind of a similar situation, you think?
It is. If she's not directly in front of a mailbox, she's enough that the
Right.
mail person can't drive up, and that's
Yeah.
what I was telling Karen. The mail people that we've hired in this city, because we're not New York, we're not Chicago, they're always in vehicles, and they're under the premise that they're going to be able to drive up to the mailbox and insert it from the side of their window, and some have even purchased vehicles to be able to do that. So I told Karen that I think the ordinance needs to specify a zone past the mailbox to protect the mail driver to be able to have, a car length and past the mailbox so that they can actually pull up and deliver.
At least on certain days and through certain hours, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
The hour
Yeah.
part of it, although my mail comes like at 5:30, but, but yeah, certain hours anyway.
I think our mail people are struggling as the city's growing faster than we're hiring mail people and federal budget and those things. I imagine they are delivering past business hours.
Yeah.
Have you talked to the postmaster about it?
I actually stopped by the post office that day, and they were the ones to tell me to call the police.
Okay, because I have seen them in front of my house. They'll get out of their vehicle and put the mail in the mailbox. So I'm not sure.
Probably
if-
depends on the individual that's.
Yeah, that's what I'm
delivered.
wondering. So you might want to ask the postmaster if that's a hard and fast rule that they don't have to get out of their vehicle to put the mail in the mailbox.
I'm sure he probably has to, and I imagine that the note we've got and the delivery is I'm frustrated and I'm tired of having to get out and walk, and
The lady next door, that in our neighborhood next door, the first time she got her mail, it wasn't her car, but that was the problem. She got her mail, put in her, because they had to get out, park the car, get out, and put her mail, and put it in there with a note that it won't be delivered if there's a car parked in front of it again. And then the neighbor, of course, proceeded to continue to park in front of the mailbox. So it was about a week that she didn't get her mail. So if we could put Andrew to looking into language, and if there's something else that does address that, so the police have a little bit of a tool to move a car on. If you'll look at that, bring it back to his next meeting.
The traffic committee has been working on a complete parking ordinance, and it might need to be put in with that because,
It would need to fit into.
yeah.
Yeah.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list, Miss Selena Stevens.
Good evening, everyone. I am the director for the Schoolhouse Champions 5K, and I'm back to you again this year to ask for support for our 6th run. So to give you just a little bit of background on this, we started it in 2004, and we registered we registered 433 people, and ran 327. And last year, we registered 599 and ran 419. We started supporting 3 schools, and now last year we had 10, and this year we're actually talking to every school in Scott County to participate in this run. So last year we had the support of the police department and the public works, which was excellent. They were all very helpful and very kind, and we really appreciated that. We're looking to do this again this year on the 27th of April. Standard, no changes from the previous years.
And needless to say, with those numbers, this is the large 5K route.
Yeah.
We have 3 routes. and
Yes,
you
it
picked
is
the
the
large
yeah.
route.
Yeah. And just so you know, the first year we were able to donate from this race $6,000 back into the school system. Last year we donated over $11,000
Wow,
back.
that was great.
Very impressive. Good.
So motion.
Yeah.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Easy one for Karen.
Polly?
Oh, probably.
Karen with the motion,
Polly with the second.
Polly with the second. All right, if there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Thank you all very much.
Mayor's comments will be brief tonight. I know I say that every meeting, don't
Well, now Connie's not here.
He's consistent.
I?
Seems to have the biggest issue.
Connie's not here to really get the chuckle out of it.
That's right.
First, under Mayor's comments, let me congratulate everybody on running outstanding races, and glad Election Day is done, and we move forward. Also in that spirit, I'm pleased to welcome tonight both Tammy Lesby Mitchell and Todd Stone. Thank you all for beginning to sit in. I encouraged each of the new council members elect to be here tonight to hear the architecture presentation and other business that we're doing tonight. So thank you all for doing that. Also, just wanted to remind the council, if your calendar is clear, this coming Friday evening, the 16th, is the George Lesby retirement dinner at the Georgetown College Conference Center. We expect to pack the place. It should be a really fun evening. There's been a group working on it for some time, and that'll be this Friday evening at the conference center. Also, I wanted to let you know that after several years, I think the need has existed for several years, Planning and Zoning is interviewing companies to fly the county again and update all of our aerial photographs. Just needs to be done periodically. It provides the base things, so we do overlays over it. And so much gets built so quickly that we have to fly occasionally. And they are interviewing the last two firms, probably looking at somewhere around $250,000 to fly it with the kind of detail that we want. Of course, that's done in this season, so all the foliage is off the plants, and you can get as good a photography of the ground as you can. We're very close to having the design work completed for East Main Street Extended, which will let us be able to bid it and move forward with that. And lastly, I wanted to, our second council meeting in December is currently scheduled on the calendar for December the 24th.
We will be here.
If any of you all choose to meet on December the 24th, I'll be happy to have someone open the building for you.
You're on your
No thanks.
Traditionally, what we've done is cancel that meeting, and unless we have the need to call you together for a special call meeting. So I thought we would do that if there's a motion to that effect.
Make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I was gonna say, the rest of y'all wanna show up?
I was giving somebody else a chance.
That's right.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. And then also, if you'll note, under Mayor's comments, we have an executive order appointing Kierra Joseph to the Georgetown Housing Authority Board. We're very restricted by law as to what categories of folks we need to appoint to this board. And this is a resident member of the board. So I would ask for a motion approving her appointment.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We, for some time, have been looking at City Hall. And she's a beautiful old building that needs some love. And in a few ways, she's gotten a little dog-eared. We knew that step one was to really evaluate the building carefully by folks that know exactly what they're doing and give us an assessment of its condition. We went through an RFQ process, and you've met the folks from Lord Aeck Sargent. They've completed their evaluation. They've completed some ideas of what a renovated City Hall could look like. And staff has responded to those, and we've incorporated some of those. And we also they have also developed some cost estimates on what the various phases of this project might be. And I thought it was just great to go ahead and let you all see this report and get the sticker shock right away.
Okay.
We also recognize that due to some things that have kind of gotten on our priority list, such as East Main Street Extended, that this is something we're probably going to put off for 6 to 12 months in terms of going forward with the actual design, with the real getting ready to bid and actually making decisions. So we're at a point here where we can see where we are and kind of get poised for the next step.
Just hold on.
So I'll turn it over to Karen and Elizabeth.
Hello. Has anyone seen the report besides the staff at the city? No. Okay. All right. My name is Karen Gravel. I'm a historic preservation architect. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I grew up in Cynthiana, so I went to Harrison County High School. Elizabeth Hunt works with me in Lexington, Kentucky, and she is an architect as well. We have just, let me see, let me turn this thing on. Let's see. Hold on, just let me make sure.
Say it again for the record, I love technology. It might need batteries. We can, you can for the details. For the moment, you can just point at Lori and she'll flip it for you.
Point at Lori.
Just point that way.
Just point that way. Help me, Lori. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's clicking.
Okay, so we have recently completed some projects in Kentucky, one being Louisville City Hall, the exterior rehabilitation, and Patterson Hall for the University of Kentucky. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these buildings, but these are the kind of things we work on a lot, so.
Lori? Hello, Lori. Just tap on the window, Chief. Here we are.
Okay, so the point of our study was to look at the building to answer 3 basic questions. Is the building structurally sound and can it go forward into the future? What is the structure and how can it be altered? Number 2, what would be the program that we would look at for the building? What is necessary to go in the structure? And number 3, how much would this cost? These are very basic questions, but these guided our entire study. Yes, yes, and yes. So tonight I'm going to go through our process for evaluating the structure and then what came out of our study. So next. And we can go again. So I am a historic preservation architect. That means that I primarily work on historic buildings. I have a history degree in architecture, so I've kind of combined that into what I do. So our approach to these things are always based in the Secretary of Interior Standards for Preservation. And these, you can look them up on the website. They're from National Park Service. And anytime a project either goes for tax credits or is a National Historic Landmark or is in a historic district, we follow these basic guidelines. I've simplified them just because it's easier to talk about them. The first being, we do no harm. We always find out exactly what let's go back. So we do no harm. We always identify the character defining features. We make sure that we keep as much historic material as we can. We use the gentlest means possible when we're rehabilitating a structure. And we understand the evolution. So when we take things out, we understand that was historic or not. And then I always add my additional commentary is when it's gone, it's gone. So if you tear down a historic building or you take out a historic piece, it's usually not going to come back. And that we have to be very careful when we approach these things. So the history of City Hall is pretty long and varied. I'm going to go through briefly what we know. It started out as, this land started out as a prison and perhaps in a stray pen. It was sold in 1820 when a hotel was built on the site. This hotel had various configurations and was known as the Pratt Hotel for a long time. It was torn down in the late 1800s. This was the structure that was there. It was torn down when the city bought the land to build the new city hall. This is what it was supposed to look like when it was designed. There were citizens who didn't like that there was so much brick on the building. So you'll see, well, it's hard. Pointers don't go to screens anymore, but you can tell on the tower there's so much brick on this drawing. That was changed during construction in 1899, and they ended up building the entire tower and the front facade with the limestone.
And what that picture, when you get to look at that picture up close, what's remarkable about it is the little round thing up on the roof.
That's right.
Is a clock.
Right. We'll talk about the clock because later there was actually a vent that was in the roof. This picture, we always go back to pictures like this because they help tell the intent of the architect. Sometimes we see actual pictures, sometimes we just see drawings, but this is about the closest thing we have to the original intent. So here's the cornerstone, 1899, very prominent on the building now, and an earlier shot of the building as it was built. Over time, I don't know how much you all know about the building, but the opening in the front was widened to increase capacity for a larger fire truck. There were egress stairs built in the back. They were later enclosed in the 2000s. You all got an elevator, got egress stairs, and there were a lot of renovations that happened through the 80s and the 90s. And this is the building as it stands today. One thing we do when we start to look at a building, we do a laser scan of the building. This is when they come in with a camera that's called a Faro camera, and it sends out all these little bits of light, and it creates a three-dimensional point cloud of the building. We do this a lot to document historic structures because A, it gives you a record in time of the building so that if something happens to it, you can go back to it and get to rebuild a portion of it. B, it's a great basis for us to build our model and do our drawings from because it's very accurate. It can get down to a 1/4 inch accuracy. And it's also very economical for us because we can go back into the point cloud and measure from it all the time instead of coming down and measuring here, and it's much more accurate than having us on site for a week trying to dimension everything.
Is it essentially an as-built? I mean,
it's like an as-built, but it is not a model in the sense. We take this and we build a Revit model from it, and from that Revit model we do two-dimensional drawings that are biddable. But it's a great tool for capturing things. And one thing, when you were talking about the photography of the land, I'm sure they laser scan now from airplanes too. But it's a great technology that we've tried to incorporate in every project now.
It's been amazing, David. With the point cloud established, they can just shave away places in the building and give you a cross section.
Well, this is an example that I'm just showing the cross section. It helps us to see what the floor-to-floor heights are, what the cavities are. We can see the structure exactly as it is. We've used this before in other projects to integrate ductwork. We'll take it into the point cloud and figure out and have the two going in together. We've massed additions to buildings with this, so it's an excellent tool that we kind of use all the time now. So when we're dealing with the Secretary of Interior standards for preservation, we always need to, when we're evaluating buildings for the National Park Service, we try to get tax credits.
If you wouldn't mind, we're
Are you taping this?
Well, we're trying to pick you up. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To go back.
I just tend to walk around the room.
I do the same
I'm
thing.
sorry.
You're on TV.
Yeah, we're having.
Oh, I'm on TV. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that's a lot of pressure. Okay. All right. Well, we enumerate. Well, what we do is we enumerate the character-defining features, and these are all the historic elements of the building that we want to retain, or we want to keep, or we want to preserve. And so, on the exterior of Georgetown City Hall, we have, the whole mass of the building, the way you've got the tower, the steep roofs, the way the doors handled. All of this is called what we call American Queen Anne. That's the basis of the building. But then we have elements, oh, whoops, now I'm going fast, like the roof slope. The actual roof we think was a slate roof previously. We have the cornice line, which is copper. We've got all the detail on the front of the building. We've got the limestone. All the way it's cut is important. The window sills are character-defining features. Just looking at the way the openings have been altered over time, we always try to go back and figure out what are we going to do with the openings. For example, on the eastern side, there's several windows that have been blocked in. We try to get those opened up if we can. We've got brick masonry on the back of the building with stone lintels. We've got openings that have been blocked in, again, on this side. But we just try to take inventory of all these character-defining features. On the interior, the character-defining features are the volumes of the spaces. We've got, you know, these very large spaces here, and upstairs there were very large spaces back in the day. In the front there was large spaces, and the ceilings have been lowered. We try to get the ceilings back up to a height that's nice and above the windows. We've got the space up in the third floor that's got a very grand kind of scale and size and height. We take a look at that and try to get back to that scale. We've got the vault that's a character-defining feature. We've got the actual brick masonry walls that we don't really want to mess with, because when you start getting into the structure, we want to keep the structure as it was as much as possible. But these things are important elements to the building and have been here forever. We've got wood framing you can see it in the attic, but it's also in some of the other walls. But it's important. This particular picture happens to show where the dormer was taken out of the roof a long time ago. Interior woodwork is important. All your window sills, all the window casings, the transoms that are above the ceiling. I think in the front room, the ceiling's been lowered and the transoms are above the ceiling. We'd like to find those. The way the plaster's rounded, that's a character-defining feature. So we get into our field investigation. We worked with BFMJ, who's a structural engineer, and CMTA, who's a mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, fire protection engineer. Together with us, we all looked at the building and documented the existing conditions. We did this by hand on our laser scans and our floor plans that we generated from that. And from there, we established the condition and the treatment going forward. On the roof, the asphalt shingle portion has been replaced recently. The roof is not leaking. It's in good shape. The top part of the roof, the metal portion, is getting to the end of its serviceable life. We have, in our study, put in a slate roof to go back onto the steeper portion of the roof, and then the restoration of the cornice line. This is another picture from the back side of the building. We actually had a drone. We have a drone that we work with too, that we brought it and flew it around to help look at some of these areas that are of particular interest. This is at the chimney, and we have to make sure that all the joints at the chimney level are sound, and we could see some evidence of moisture infiltration on the eastern side of the wall, but I'll get to that in a minute. The exterior has a lot of issues with the masonry, and you all can probably see it when you go out. You can see spalling, and I can't really point at it, but there's some spalling. You can see it along this portion of the building where the limestone is just flaking off. You get so much water behind the limestone, and it goes through the freeze-thaw cycle, and then it'll pop off. That's happening on the front. Oh, you do? Well, I just don't want anybody to get hit with it.
Pieces of stone that have fallen.
Okay. So we documented all this, and it needs to be sounded, and this is a good example. So we noted all these places on the front of the elevation. And one thing that happens with buildings, with limestone in particular, and some bricks, they'll put in a mortar that is really hard. If you can see, the mortar is still hard and standing, but the stone around it is eroding. That's because it was repointed at one time with a mortar that's really hard, and it's holding the water in the stone or the brick or whatever it is. But this is happening on the building because there is a hard mortar in there and the stone is so soft, it just erodes right away. So we need to get the hard mortar out and replace it with a softer mortar that's as soft or softer than the limestone, so that the moisture will go out of the the mortar joints rather than the stone. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's a big deal on this building. So we have called out areas for it to be repointed, and it's hard to see on this, but we've actually shaded big patches of area where it's more predominant, and especially around the base of the building. Right here. You can walk out here now and just see what's happening. So we've documented all this and put this in the cost estimate. We also have looked at the windows. The windows have been replaced in the 80s. I think the frames are still there, but we would replace the sashes with wood sashes, and if we can get the ceiling heights up on the interior, we can get places where the transom's been filled in with a solid panel higher, so that you have a much bigger window. And then on the side, again, we've got some issues with the mortar, and then where windows have been filled in, trying to get those opened up again for interior space. And same on the back, some of the windows have been infilled. We've got some areas in the attic where we've got efflorescence. Does anybody know what that is? Efflorescence is where moisture comes through a masonry wall, and then you see this white puffy stuff, and it looks like salts. It's the salts coming through the mortar and through the wall. And you just want to make sure that there's no water coming in the top of the parapet or the side of the wall, driving these salts through the building. And in the attic, you can see on this eastern wall where we think moisture may be getting in the wall. So we just need to make sure that the exterior is buttoned up so that you don't have this constant moisture coming in. And then I'm going to touch briefly on the engineers MEP stuff. That we looked at all the different mechanical systems that are in the building. It looks went forward with the assumption of replacing the mechanical system with a geothermal system. We also are going to replace the electrical switchgear. It's at least 37 years old and needs to be replaced and upgraded. And then new AV system, new security and surveillance system, and access control. And then we'd also suggest looking at creating a stair that comes out the front to help lead you to the front door. But that is the building analysis. Elizabeth is going to talk about program and the floor plan and ideas for interior of the building.
Okay. They're all different. I can never figure them out. So we started the process with a visioning session and a kind of programming working session. What we wanted to do was present our findings, both from the field and start to look at the program itself and what our suggestions would be for how to renovate the interior of the space. I guess one important thing that we really talked about at the meeting is really the must-haves versus the it would be really nice to have. A lot of the things that Karen has gone through are a lot of the, when you're looking at the rehabilitation and renovation part, a lot of the things that Karen has gone through are a lot of the must-haves, as in this is what we have to save the building and make it sound. Then there's the other side of the must-haves of what you need in your space to make it a really viable space to allow for future flexibility. And then the would love to haves are, let's shoot for the moon and make this a really awesome space. And if we could, there were no limitations, this is what we would do. So in looking at the existing program of the building, these are all of the existing plans. And so the basement is really used for storage right now. A lot of the office space down there has been vacated. So it's a lot of storage and a lot of the basic support space. A really small electrical room. The data is all in a small closet, and I wish I could point to this. I don't think it will. Oh, it doesn't do it on your screen. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So there's a really small data closet. And everything is kind of broken up in that back space. So one thing we wanted to do, which you'll see in just a few minutes, is, try to keep a lot of that in the same place, but, make it big enough for what was needed, but not create a lot of extra holes in the building to bring stuff in. The first floor, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, obviously the council chambers, the city clerk's office, and the city engineer's office. There's also the larger AV room right there and a small meeting room across the hall. And on the second floor, obviously all the offices, the mayor's office, we have city attorney, finance, HR, and another meeting room up there. One other thing that we noted during our investigation is that while it's nice to have the restrooms on each floor, they unfortunately don't comply with current code and ADA regulations. So that was another area of focus, is looking at the existing building and where we need to bring things up to code, which that's sort of slid under your must-haves. You kind of have to do it. And then the third floor is obviously vacant right now, not in use. So it's a big, wide open space. So what we wanted to do in looking at the basement floor is really make this a general support floor and really utilize the space, because I think it's really underutilized right now. We would, I'm opposite here. Okay, in the back corner up there, so top left on to you all, the turquoise would be a larger central break room. Right now there are 3 or 4 break spaces kind of throughout the building. So this would be one space that you could have everything housed in one place. You could put some tables and chairs in there and just have one area for everybody to go to. Also in that corner is a larger electrical room, which is in the same place as it is now. It's just expanded, so it's big enough to add all of the extra stuff and guts that we need for the electrical system. There would also be a dedicated AV and data closet down there, as well as a small workroom. And then all of the mechanical side of the space would be moved over to the right-hand side of the building. We've added a restroom and moved the mechanical room over to that side to be able to give enough space for everything. And then the front left part would be dedicated storage. There would be lockable storage areas in there for each department, and then just some general open storage and a small workroom. And the purple in the bottom right would be a training room or larger meeting room that any of the departments could use for internal training or larger meetings if necessary.
It also could be the overflow room for council meetings.
It could, on the few times of year where there are a lot of people. And hopefully we've helped solve that issue a little bit as well. But if there is still more need for overflow, then you could certainly use this room and with AV be able to still maintain a connection. On the first floor, what is looking like pink now on this screen is the revised council chambers. So what we wanted to do is look at what's the best way to use this space to fit more people in here than you can currently fit. So we've taken your bench and we've just shifted you a little bit, but it allows you to put more people in this space just doing that small shift, and you wouldn't have to make any other changes to the room. Then we've also taken over the AV room and a little bit of what is now the city clerk's office as a flex space. We could put a large opening in that wall to be able to either open it up or close it off. So it becomes more overflow for council chambers, or you can close it off and have a smaller meeting space altogether that's used for a different function. Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The wall that's kind of behind you, I don't guess that could, I know I'm kind of getting into.
Half of it can, David. The vault is right here. We can't move the vault, but we can leave a little wing wall beside the vault.
Yes.
Which is what you see represented. We can't move that vault in the orange. but we can come down beside it and use some of the floor space in that direction.
You're not talking about this wall.
I'm talking about the one directly behind it where the
What
white
about
door
the
is.
closet?
So a portion of that does get removed. We still need
Some of it
a
can go
small
outside.
closet here for the AV and for mechanical chase,
Yeah.
but a large portion of it does get removed to help pick up that space
That
again.
wall itself is major load-bearing wall.
It is.
We asked the same question.
I'm just,
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
there may be some duct work, but we think most of the equipment can go downstairs
Mm-hmm.
and capture much of that space.
I'm just looking at the two seats that are gonna be kind of back in that area, and it's, you know, a little bit of sight distance might be impaired a little bit.
And we may need, just given how that room feels, David, we may need some additional monitors in the room just for the size crowd. As I recall, we go from, you know, we've only got around 24 to 26 seats in here. And as I recall, this gets us up close to 80,
It does. I think it was, I think 76.
76.
Yeah.
So it's a significant
Yeah,
enhancement
yeah.
in council space, council meeting space, which we do need from time to time with overflow downstairs.
Correct. And I think, I mean, really the size of that closet and that chase is probably, you know, it can fluctuate because I'm not sure exactly what that would need to be just quite yet. So, I mean, that's definitely something to keep in mind as you move through the design process. Across the hall from council chambers is a council lounge, which as you walk in the door there to the right, we're showing a kind of a mail station, or a drop station or a catch-all or whatever you need to use it for. And then a couple of desks or conference space or just sit down and chit-chat space. Again, we looked at the restrooms. We're still contained within that general space. Right now, there's a closet, kind of where we've shown the janitor's closet in gray out in front of the restrooms. It's really big right now. And on this floor, I believe there's some mechanical equipment in there or a large duct, one of the two. And with revamping the mechanical system as we've proposed, a lot of that can go away and we can pick up space for the restrooms by shrinking that space on both this floor and the second floor. So that really allows us to be able to just kind of scoot things around a little bit to get the right clearance that we need for the restrooms. So there's the space that the restrooms take up now, it's not really taking up that much more. It's contained in that same overall space. We're just reorganizing the interior of that a little bit. And then the front of the building are where the two biggest changes are. In the turquoise, that is what we would propose to be the new secure city clerk's office. As you come in the building, we've proposed to make that vestibule a little bit bigger. And then we've also put a reception desk just down the hall, just to have an added security measure. And then as you go into the city clerk's office, there's a wall. I am so turned around without my pointer, I apologize. A secure wall with a small waiting area and transaction windows, and then the city clerks are actually in a secure space behind that. And then to the left in the orange is kind of an open flex space. We talked about maybe that's where someone can come and set up a little shop, or it's an art display or tourism office or something like that. And then I think what became one of my favorite parts is to use the vault in some way to, you know, as a reading room or a small little history show of Georgetown or City Hall or something like that, and really use that cute little space for something else. The vault is sitting, sort of, on a 117-foot deep well that you can't do anything with. That's why the vault was actually placed there, because they couldn't move that well. So they just put a giant vault on top of it. And we want to do something fun with that space. I think it'd be fun.
Now you know why it's there.
You say a well, like a water well?
Really?
Because it was used originally in the early 1800s. It was used as a pen, and who knows? It's early 1800s.
Can I ask you one
no,
more
go ahead.
question about the council chambers? I
Sure.
noticed that it kind of, back where the window is, it extends back. Could the
does.
floor be elevated so the seating is elevated in the back? So people could see over top of the folks?
You know, that is something that we could potentially look into. Part of what is going to dictate that is having the right number of exits out of that space. And so when that room is open, that exit that you see off of the back into the orange space has to be maintained, and it has to be accessible. So if we start raising that floor, then it starts making that exit more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's definitely something
I'm just
that we
asking
could.
questions.
Yeah.
I mean-
No, I mean, it's something that we did not previously explore, but that we could.
So one of the things that I mentioned a moment ago was sight distance. Now that I'm looking at that back area, you know, if there's people sitting at this table,
Right.
that sight distance could be impacted as well. And I'm not being critical.
Sure.
We're just talking. This might be my only chance to
Sure.
speak
No,
to you
no,
all.
no. No, completely understood.
I'm trying to be constructive.
We definitely talked about that as well, and that's when we said, well, maybe we need to get creative with using monitors so that everybody, you know, can maintain that sight.
The vault creates the problem with
Yeah.
lines of sight. We could do so much with that space, but the vault can't be moved. So we talked about constructive use of monitors. The folks on the left side of that deeper part, David, are going to have a vision restriction. On
Right.
the right side, they may be able to see okay. But I think some monitors are going to be required back there.
Of course, also the council, when David's point, the council that's sitting on this side over here won't be able to see into the audience, and it's also important for the council to see the reactions of the audience when things are said and talked about, and you won't be able to see them. But
I think we need to reduce this closet as much as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It needs to be tucked
Yeah.
back
Yep.
until you know what exactly it is.
Well, we generally start out with kind of a worst case scenario, because if you can make it work with a worst case scenario, then if it gets better than that, then it's just a better condition. So we started with worst case of what it would have to be at its greatest for that closet width and depth and for the mechanical shaft. But hopefully we could do better and get that down a little bit. Anything else on council chambers?
And Karen, my first reaction was kind of like yours. Eventually, when we get to design what this bench really looks like in detail, I'm not sure 2 council members or 4 council members are going to want to look at each other and be sideways to the crowd. Just something we'll have to work out.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this was, you know, looking at what's the best way to maximize the amount of people in one room without having to have the overflow space. So if it's determined that, you know, we're okay with using the training room downstairs as the overflow space, then we can look at some different options for council chambers as well.
And this was one of the things that I pushed Elizabeth and her staff on real hard, that this was a have to. We had to have better council chambers, I felt like, if we were going to do this project. So that's been a real struggle to meet that standard.
On the second floor, we essentially have 2 options to take a look at, and I will do my best to explain the options. The first option is really designed with a caveat that we're proceeding with the 3rd floor renovation too. So this is kind of the shoot for the moon, let's dream big and do it all option. So what this does is, if we're going to move some of the departments up to the 3rd floor, this lets you have a lot more flexible space and expansion space on the 2nd floor. So in the purple on the bottom right, the mayor's office gets turned into a very large meeting room with a small pre-function space out.
no, Mayor, no. That office is beautiful.
We would still make it beautiful, I promise. It would have a small pre-function space out in front of it. And then the two departments that are proposed to be housed on this level would be the city engineer and human resources. The city engineer is in, we'll call that red, and human resources is in lime green. What it really does is takes the current concept of everybody being in closed offices and mixes that with the new office concept of having open collaborative workstations. It also gives you a lot of flexible expansion space. So there are still offices for the directors of each department, and then there are open workstations for the staff in each department. So you can see this allows you to have, gotta do my math real quick, 7 total staff for each of those departments, which really just allows for the flexible growth space in the future. It can be used by different departments now. The important part of that is just that it has that flexibility for whatever you would need it for. The lighter turquoise colors all represent team areas or collaborative areas. It's a small sit-down table or a quiet room if you needed to have a quiet conversation. This is what's really popular with the open office concept, because you still need a space where you can have private conversations or take a phone call or something like that. And then across the hall in what is currently the meeting room, that is really just designated as a flexible office space for now. If someone needed a closed office or you needed a workroom or something else, it's there as a flex space.
You especially like the concept of those 2 little meeting rooms at the top of the image. Just very small little. Let me grab you to talk about this idea. Spaces, and we seem to work that way a lot.
Then the other option for the second floor is if the third floor renovation either does not happen or if it's a phased project and the third floor happens later. This is how you can still fit everybody on the floor and also have some room for future growth and expansion. So essentially, the mayor's office stays exactly where it is in this concept. And then we utilize the same concept as the other option with directors' offices and open workstations for staff. So you don't have quite as many stations for growth, but you do have, I believe, twice the amount of stations that you currently have. So there is still room for some growth, just not as much as with the other option. So this floor would still house every department that is currently here with city engineer, human resources, city attorney, finance, and the mayor's office.
I have a question. If it was to stay that way, the mayor only has one door into his office and no exit out of his office except that door. And this is kidding aside, but it's kind of serious. There's many times when I was in that office that I thought I would get shot before the day was over. And and I thought about that seriously. There was no way to get out of that office if something like that happened to come into that office. Is there any way to put an extra door into that office to at least go back out of that closet so you may have a second chance to get out?
Yeah, I mean, I think something like that's definitely possible. I think the other big thing that is a consideration for the design as a whole is securing the building, because right now there's no security system at all. And so another part of that is, even if this is, if the configuration remains like this, looking at how we secure those spaces, I think would help alleviate some of that. And I think we could definitely look at, adding another door in there. But I think the first thing we want to look at is the security system itself and how to use that to our advantage.
Yeah, and I appreciate the mayor thinking that way. But as this whole thing has been discussed, we're really rethinking the security of the building and making it more of a controlled access building. I think that with the city clerk having a protected office and a transaction window, and then there being controlled access to the elevator even to get to the second floor, we're a lot better off than we are today.
Yeah, but as there's been, when I was mayor, there was times I wanted to sneak out of that office without anybody being able to see me when they come to talk to your gatekeeper, and then just find a way to sneak out. The only way I could figure out was jump out the window, and that didn't work out too well. So,
Well, rappelling out, I'm not good at that.
but then I thought
I saw a parachute in there one day.
but there is a real security issue in the mayor's office, and things are crazier today than they used to be.
Of course. And that's, I mean, the one of the goals was really look at how do we make one floor a purely public floor and one floor an office floor. That, you know, that's why looking at where we could have some meeting spaces on one of the other floors was key, so that you don't necessarily, the public doesn't have to come up to the second floor to have meetings. I mean, you can, and it certainly wouldn't keep anybody from getting up there who was supposed to be up there. But that was one of the reasons in looking at opportunities for meeting spaces on the other floors, is to try to have a public floor versus a private controlled floor.
But there's one thing we don't want to lose for the city with talking about security for the mayor, because I think that's important, but one thing we don't want to lose because of the type of town that we are, that it's still access to the mayor.
Sure.
That's what, if you're angry or you're happy or you're whatever, you got a concern, you want to be able to march into the mayor's office and say, hey, I need to talk to the mayor. And that's the great thing about a small town like we are, to say, okay, let me see if he or she is free, and we'll get you set up and come on in.
Sure.
So you don't want to change that by locking it down too much with that. So, but that's just a comment.
Okay. Moving on to the third floor. Again, this is our let's shoot for the stars and put everything in here. In utilizing the third floor, so the blocks of white around the perimeter, what's nice about the attic space is that the roof is such a steep slope that even though you don't really have walls up there except for on the east side, because it's really the roof that is starting to slope up, but what's nice is because of that slope is so steep that once you get past where those white blocks are, you have enough headroom to actually make those inhabitable spaces. So it really gives you a lot of space to work with up there. We would propose that the mayor's office move up here and stay in the tower in that bottom corner, with his associated offices to the side. And then we would propose for the city attorney and for the finance department to also move up here. In looking at trying to bring light into the space, so we don't want to punch new openings in the roof for a couple of reasons. First, because it's not historically accurate. Second, because that's just another water infiltration waiting to happen. So we want to utilize the existing windows that are there, and then probably utilize glass walls or glass in the walls of those offices to help bring light into the inside of that space. So all of the, again, directors' offices would be on that kind of exterior perimeter with a meeting room that is the little purple space. And then the turquoise space at the rear of the building would be, again, a flex space or a collaboration space. We have an open file copy area on each floor. So what that does is just really starts to maximize the floor itself and make it really efficient, rather than having a lot of closed rooms for everything.
Did you think about putting the council chambers up there? How much space is up there?
So there are a couple of issues with putting the council chambers up there. The first is just access to it, and the fact that the first floor has typically been the public floor, and so we were trying to maintain that. Second is with the loading of that space. If you put a use up there like the council chambers, it's going to be a much heavier loaded space, which may require a lot more structural modifications to happen to make that work. We would also have to look at the exiting requirements for that. So it's more of a code and cost issue to put the council chambers up there.
Would that be the same issue if you took it to the second floor instead of this floor?
A little bit, though not quite as much. We did look at the second floor, and we talked about the second floor as an option. We ran into some of the same issues there with where the load-bearing masonry walls are. So it's still hard to expand bigger than this footprint just because of where the masonry walls are.
You go from assembly occupancy, which you would be in here, to if you get over 50 people from a business occupancy, and
right.
you start having fire separation.
Okay. Right.
And up there, there's a lot of columns that columns need to stay, and you can't get the free span that you have here.
So there are a lot, I think, if you guys can see what look like little black dots all over the plan, those are all of the existing columns that are up there. So what we've done is actually tried to keep them out so that you can see them and see what the space once was. And that makes it a little tough with a larger assembly space, especially with the viewpoints, which I know are a concern. The other thing that we would do with the third floor is we would have to bring the elevator and both stairs up to that level. The good thing, again, with the steep slope of the roof is that the overhead clearance for the elevator fits just under where the roof is. So again, we don't have to punch through the roof for that either, which is another big plus. And then we would just propose to essentially add on to the rear stair tower and bring that brick up and kind of extend the roof over a little bit. I don't think that it would be, obtrusive. I mean, you would see it, but I don't think that it would be obtrusive from what's already there.
The cupola at the very tip top is actually above, it's actually above the third floor.
It is.
I've been up
Fourth
there.
floor.
Yeah, and so it's, have you addressed that, or is it just gonna be in?
So we have looked at that. We have not addressed that just yet for a couple of reasons. One, the stair getting up there scares the life out of me, but
It's beautiful when you're up there.
But that's neither here nor there. We're not quite sure yet what we can do with that space because there are, again, some building code implications to that with regards to the number of stories that puts there, how many exits are out of the space, and what it's used for. Yeah, because then you're getting into adding more stairs up there, and then that does affect the roof line of the existing building. So that part is a little bit more complicated.
But we haven't put anything up there right now.
No, we have not put anything up there right now. And especially if it's a space that's going to be used by other people, then that's where the access issue comes into it. If it's just going to be like a really awesome space for the mayor to use, then that's easier to address. But without really knowing exactly what the options are for that or how you really want to use that space, we have not addressed that yet.
I just thought that'd be a cool office for the mayor for that cupola up there.
There's some, depending on how we use it, changes the code requirements. But the dream is to have a little staircase up to it from inside the mayor's office, and it'd be a nice place to sit with a view of all around Georgetown and maybe 2 chairs and.
We even asked if it couldn't be used as floor space, if it could be, the ceiling could be essentially removed and opened up all the way.
That could be the
It could be a
lights.
big, I think that presented issues too. I don't remember what it was, but.
There was part of
We do.
there was part of that. Part of it plays into the the rehabilitation part, and with potential tax credits and how much we're maintaining of the building. So you don't want to get rid of too much when you're pursuing historic tax credits either. So it all kind of plays into. There's a little piece that plays into all of it. I think it would be a great space. I believe originally it wasn't enclosed. The openings up there were open and it was more like a porch space.
Oh, cool.
And then it was enclosed at some point, and now there are little critters up there.
Yes, there is.
But little dead ones.
Grown to their size.
But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a great space because once you're brave enough to go up there, there are great views. So just to recap, yes, the building is structurally sound. Yes, the building can be renovated and expanded for future growth. And the sticker shock value to do all of that is $6.1 million. Now, that includes your shoot for the moon, let's do all of this, slate roof, renovate all the floors, except for the 4th floor in the tower, or one little caveat, and puts everything into it, you know, the new geothermal system and everything. So that is your all-in construction budget for your shoot for the moon type option. There's our lovely cost estimate for that. We do have included in that estimate the contractors, an estimate for the contractor's general conditions, bonds, taxes, fees, and there's also a contingency in there for any design-related changes that may come up through the process. It does not include furniture, fixtures, or equipment, and it does not include the design fees for that renovation.
So it's not turnkey?
It is not. It is not a complete project budget. It is a construction budget.
Okay.
Do you know how many usable square feet that your plan comes up with?
It is, I should know this off the top of my head, it is roughly 17,000 once you put the 3rd floor into it. It's 17,000 and some change, we'll say.
That's the total square footage.
That's the total square footage if you put the 3rd floor in.
The assignable program, I think, was like just under 11,000.
The assignable program was close, it was close to 12,000, and then you would have the circulation space on top of that, and I am not sure that that included all of the storage spaces either.
But in terms of finished square footage, 17,000, is that what you're?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to include things like bathrooms and hallways.
Yes.
Gotcha.
It includes the stairs, elevator.
Stairs.
Yeah, it includes everything.
$360 a square foot.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the exterior? Do you have to take that off and then put it back to?
No, you don't have to take it off. We've actually written up the scope on the elevations of repointing certain areas, certain stones that need to be pinned back together and fixed or patched depending on where they are. And then that includes a full new roof and new windows actually in
Right.
all of the openings, new wood windows, double pane.
So were you all surprised? Were you all shocked? Or did this $360 a square foot, does that kind of, is that what you're accustomed to?
I was not surprised.
I was not surprised at all. I thought we would be in the, you know, anywhere from probably $5.5 to $7 million. I thought we would fall somewhere in that range.
We were actually braced for $7 million.
See, we led with that. I will say, when we had our visioning session and our programming session, I said, well, I mean, you know, we might actually be closer to between 6 and 7 million. So I tried to put that up front a little bit so that there may not be quite as much sticker shock once we got down to the nitty gritty of the details.
Is there a cost breakdown for the work on the exterior and then a cost breakdown on the different floors on the interior?
So the way that we priced everything was an all-inclusive, again, I keep saying this shoot for the moon phrase because that's kind of what we dubbed this at our visioning session. So we did an estimate based on an all or nothing, let's do this the right way project. It certainly can be broken down between interior and exterior, and actually we looked at opportunities for phasing. And so phase 1 could be the exterior rehabilitation, and then phase 2 would be the interior renovation of the basement, 1st floor, and 2nd floor, and phase 3 would be the interior renovation of the 3rd floor. So there is an opportunity to break it down into phases and help break that project cost out over 3 phases. There's also then the the opportunity for the tax credits to have more opportunity and take more advantage of tax credits because you have a new tax credit application with each phase, which allows you to get a little bit more allocated for your total project when you're doing separate applications for separate phases. That is everything.
Can the first phase be done without or with minimal disruption to the building, to the staff inside the building, or at what point does it become everybody get out?
So just to give you an example, when we did Louisville City Hall, that was a complete exterior restoration, and we did that with the building function never changing. Everybody stayed and inhabited the building the entire time. Now, what we had to do was phase things. So when we were replacing windows, we let people know ahead of time, we're gonna do these rooms and these windows, and so people might have to move around a little bit. But the building was completely occupied as the exterior restoration was going on. There may be some overlap between the phases. For instance, if you're gonna do the third floor, then it's easier while you're doing a lot of the other work to go ahead and do the elevator or look at the stairs. I mean, there may be some overlap between some of the things so that it's better from a construction staging standpoint. So there may be some opportunities where, we might need more of the building, but not sure exactly what those are just yet until we get further with things.
Okay. Two-part question.
Yes.
I'm assuming that, am I correct that our first priority needs to be the exterior?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't do anything at all, this is just a guess, but if we do nothing at all, how much time do we have before we start having issues with the exterior?
We already have issues with the spalling of the limestone, and it'll get to a point where you might have to start building back the limestone facade with patching or swapping out stones. You just don't want the erosion of the stone to get so bad that you don't have a face anymore.
Well, and I believe there were also already some water infiltration or moisture issues with the plaster, where the plaster has already had to be repaired, where water came in through.
In here, even in here.
We've got offices on the second floor that leak when it rains.
Yes.
We've got
Right.
mold in the basement.
So I think
We could have had this conversation 5 years ago.
I think we already have some issues, but I think what's key is getting the building, closed in and repaired to prevent further damage. And I'll let you, it's more your expertise, I'll let you.
Just would help to go ahead and make sure that the enclosure is sound.
Mm-hmm.
So as it relates to phasing, with some projects, phasing makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You phase in a development just because you don't always have the demand to.
Sure.
But with something like this, I guess my thought is, and I guess I'm asking you all the question, and when you phase it in, let's just say it's every 4 years. You do phase 1,
Mm-hmm.
next year you do phase 2, in 4 years, phase 3, and 4 more years. The cost, I'm sure, goes up as those years and phasing takes place. So from your all's experience, is it better to kind of bite the bullet and try to do it all at one time and be done with it? Because I also see challenges and problems. You talked about overlapping, trying to do some things in one phase that might be relevant in the second phase.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some challenges trying to remodel, and we've never brought in folks probably as high caliber as you all to help, and but we've not had very good luck remodeling buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my thought in sitting here with all that past experience, or whatever you want to call it, it seems to me that maybe just doing it all at one time is probably a very good approach, if we can afford to do that.
If you can afford to do it, it's better to do it all at one time.
Yeah.
If you can't do it all at one time, I would do the exterior first,
Right.
and then the entire interior together. Because people get fatigued
Right.
through phasing too. There's, it's just, if you have to do it, I would try to just do the two,
Yeah.
but together would be best. And then you have mobilization for one contractor at one time too. Right.
Well, it's mobilization for one contractor, and it's our ability from the administration to make arrangements to move out of the building.
Right.
For about a year, get all of our computer stuff, all of our, it's a big deal for us to make that move one time and then move back into a completed project.
What kind of a time frame to do something like this? If you did it all at one time, yeah.
Part of that,
Probably 12 months to 12 to 15 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
It depends on if you go to the third floor or not.
Yeah.
and it depends on, you know, when you would get started, because with some of the exterior stuff, temperature plays a key role, especially with a lot of the repointing and, yeah. So there are a few caveats to that, but yeah, I would think 12 to 15 months.
The construction estimates that you all providing, I mean, you're talking about all systems, windows, wiring,
Slate roof.
HVAC, everything.
Is there a better time of the year to bid a project like this? You know,
I don't know.
I would think,
Spring to start.
you know, after January, or if you bid it when it's cold and nobody's, and people aren't doing, you know, they're gearing up
Not
for
as
their
busy.
spring, then that's better than like now. This is the worst time to bid it, the holidays.
If we don't do anything to the third floor and only did the basement, this floor, and the next floor up, what does that do to that total cost estimate? Does that, how much does that
That's a
change?
great question. I don't think we figured it out.
No,
exactly.
we don't have it, you know, per floor or per scope, but we could take a look at that.
Mayor, I'd like to know that. The answer to that question, I think, is important, if that's possible.
And some additional details that we're trying to generate on the possibility of tax credits and what dollar amount, by what process, it's.
yeah. How does that work for a municipality? How do tax credits work for us?
So tax credits, you have state tax credits and federal tax credits. And actually in the, I say state, but Commonwealth of Kentucky, you actually do not have to be a for-profit entity to take advantage of tax credits. So government buildings and other nonprofits can take advantage of that. The difficult thing to work with is the fact that there is a cap of $5 million for the entire state for all of the projects within a year. So I believe that translates to a cap of about $400,000 for each project. If you are able to take advantage of federal tax credits, you can get up to 20%, I believe, of the construction cost in tax credits. The caveat there is there has to be a for-profit entity created where they essentially own the building and the city leases it back from them.
I think you'd only be looking at the tax
Yeah.
credits for Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kitty Dogood knows how to do this, and we had a conversation with her.
Yes, we
about
did.
it.
A very extensive one.
Yes.
So 400,000 though, that's the
That's
the
probably
number.
the max
Yeah.
that you'd get. I don't think you can go for federal.
And no, I don't think in this case the federal tax credits are as viable of an opportunity. I think, and while we think it would be great to do everything all in one phase and do it all together, like I said, that is an advantage of phasing is you could get up to 400,000 for each of those phases rather than just 400,000 for one phase.
Right, but there's challenges and additional
Correct.
cost as you wait that might eat that up.
Right. I wish there were more from the state.
Well, tax credits can be a help to us, but they're not going to be
Yeah.
the primary part of our funding. We hope that it might be a more robust portion, but any other questions at this point? At this point, Karen and Elizabeth, we're in a position to provide a hard copy of the report to the council.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll like this in your possession to be able to.
Is there a
read
PDF
through more
available as well?
carefully.
That'd be great.
We can do that.
So, you like a email and hard copy, we'll be glad to provide those to you. And then we'll continue this conversation, understanding that we've got a road that we're gonna build. That's kind of gotten in the way of immediately moving forward, but I sense there's a real interest in protecting this building and doing the right thing.
It's a great building, so, I mean,
Yes.
we've loved what we've been able to be involved with so far because it's a great little building and we would love to see it taken further.
Do you all deal with new construction as well? Do you? Just, if someone were to ask, what kind of a price per square foot would you be looking at with new construction? If somebody says, well, why in the world did you spend that much money? And you know, that our defense is we want to do this.
Yeah,
You know, we want to protect the integrity, the historical integrity of the building. But if somebody were to ask, how much is new?
You know,
And I know that's probably a broad spectrum
it
as
is.
well.
It's a very broad spectrum.
But you're talking about, you know, doing this with all the bells and whistles, so something comparable.
I mean, I would think, and that's very hard to put into a square foot cost.
Well, there's so many things with this building,
Yeah.
like the limestone
Right.
and the existing plaster. If you were to go back with the same materials, it would be more than it is to restore it. I mean, upwards of 500 a square foot.
Okay.
To do a similar building.
Okay.
You can't really, compare. There's a
Yeah,
lot of,
I know what you're saying.
Intangible
Yeah.
aspects of the project too.
But, yeah, I think David's question is not to rebuild this, but to rebuild a really nice new city hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it's appropriate to build public buildings to a higher standard. They're supposed to last longer and generate some civic pride. And
We've got cost comparisons for like police station. I mean, we got price per square foot that we could at least use
Yeah.
for that, to
Yeah.
give you an idea. I mean, that's a well-built building.
Right.
How many square feet was the police station?
Chief, you remember how many square feet the police station is? 19,000.
So that's close, right? That was 5 point something, almost 6 million for the police department. And close square footage. Okay.
So then you're looking at, you know, using that as a comparison.
Right.
I mean, and it's still a pretty similar
Right.
cost per square foot for
Right,
that.
right. To me, that's overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, that makes me feel very good about continuing this direction.
Yeah, me too.
okay,
All right.
thank you. Any other questions? Thank you all very much for the, it seems like this has taken forever, but it's been that much work. Delighted to have it presented to the council.
Very good.
Thank you for having us.
Very good presentation.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, moving into the other portions of the agenda. Under item 8, we've got a handful of things under city attorney. And if I could help Andrew with the first one of these,
With all of it.
he's surprised by
Help
that.
me with all of it.
Oh, goodness. You have in your packet a municipal order which will approve a contract with Bell Engineering concerning our TAP program. Council's been very patient. We've worked on this TAP grant since almost day one. I think Ms. Conway got us started on this TAP grant.
Yes, sir.
And we were notified of the successful funding, and it took a very long period of time to get the engineering selection done through the State Transportation Cabinet's process. And we finally completed that. You'll recall that when we submitted for this grant, we anticipated a 3-phase project. And we thought that phase 1 of the project would be all of the engineering for the entire project, phases 1, 2, and 3, and then build whatever we could with remaining funds in phase 1. The Transportation Cabinet has come back to us and asked us to consider a different approach to phase 1 of the project. And what they have asked us to consider, and it's the contract that we brought to you tonight, is that this contract completes the engineering for phase 1 of the project, what is called in all the documents the streetscape project in the amount of $156,500, and also an additional amount of $17,500 for easement services. They then recommend that we take the balance of Phase 1 funding and spend it on Phase 1 improvements, with the understanding, their advice is if we go ahead and do the engineering for Phases 2 and 3 of the project now, they have expressed reservations about funding for the program for the next couple of years, and they can't be certain about that. They are questioning us doing engineering plans for a phase that will be a year or two down the road, and will those engineering plans be stale at that time? They further advised us that if we spend the grant funds on engineering for Phase 2 and 3 and we don't complete the work physically within 3 years, we'll have to pay back that engineering amount. What makes, I think, more sense is that we as a group retain our commitment to doing the engineering for the sidewalks out there. But we do that engineering as a part of a subsequent budget expenditure. With the Transportation Cabinet's recommendation, after the engineering services, the total amount that we'll have available for the grant, including our $150,000 match, is $750,000. That will give us around $580,000 to actually implement the physical improvements of Phase 1, which are to stabilize the viaduct, build the new road bed on the viaduct, which includes the sidewalks and the overlooks, complete the green street lights extended over the viaduct, and then an entrance feature to Georgetown from West Main Street. Andrew, did you have some images?
Yeah.
If you would show some
Lori?
of the images.
Can you pull up the other?
These are the images from Bell Engineering's
Let me get you the clicker.
yeah,
How
like-
far up does Phase 1 go from Water Street up how far up West Main Street? How many feet or how many,
The other side of the viaduct.
the other side of the viaduct.
which will be where compared to where we are, you know?
Yeah, about where we're standing on the other side. Now, I think this is the entrance feature that they suggested.
I think the overhead shows it a little bit better.
Is that the red one? Forward?
Push right, yeah. There you go.
Oh, okay. All right.
You can see where this view shows the beginning of the physical improvements of the curb bump outs on West Main Street to make that that walk between South Water Street.
That's Water Street going this way, right? Next to where the orange, I don't know
Yes.
what it is, square. Okay.
So you can see the traffic bump outs. You can see that the viaduct has been significantly narrowed by adding the sidewalks on the roadbed, which we think will have a traffic calming effect and provide a much more pedestrian-friendly experience. Some of the brick inlays, are there more images, Andrew?
What about taking off that parking off of the, you're reducing, because people are parking on that one side of that bridge these days with the restaurant downtown.
Yeah, that's absolutely going to go away.
Then where are we gonna pick it up when we take it away?
We just added 20 spots on Water Street.
And how many are we taking off of that?
You can only park on one side of the viaduct now, so you're probably taking away
10?
5 or 6.
Right there.
5 or 6 at the max.
Okay.
Frankly, we've been really asking the engineers about, I'm not sure they need to be parking there. I'm not sure the viaduct is that. I think that's an okay change. Even though we lose those few spots, I think we need to lose those spots. And this will be a much more,
It's pretty. I mean,
it'd be
it looks
a lot,
nice.
it'd be very pretty for that end of Main Street. So the contract that we bring you tonight, asked to approve hiring Bell Engineering to do the engineering for this work, and then we take the balance of phase one and implement these improvements with a commitment that we still have a responsibility as a city council and a city to engineer the sidewalks out West Main and begin to make progress on that. That's our recommendation tonight.
I think it looks great.
I think it looks so cool.
Yeah.
With everything that we've got planned for Water Street and West Main, I think we can be real proud of that.
There, the street lights that you're talking about, the street lights are gonna stop at that entrance sign there and go back towards downtown, correct, on both sides?
Yes,
Yes.
the green, it's anticipated that the green lampposts extend over the viaduct.
Okay.
We kind of self-limited ourselves on the way we think about those green lampposts, frankly. I'd like for us to start thinking about how do we extend them a block off of Main Street to our side streets. We just kind of stopped and said that's enough.
It's because we got a grant with it. That's why we,
Yeah.
I mean, we got the grant to do it, so that's why we stopped. But yeah, that would be nice to continue on with them.
So this is a change from the way we thought this TAP grant would be administered. But after talking with the cabinet, we think this is a reasonable approach and have negotiated this contract.
Mayor,
Does
can
it
you
do anything
summarize
farther
it?
down? Does it do anything farther down Water Street?
No, this is all West Main.
Okay, so we're not, it doesn't tackle anything on Water Street.
No, it should tie in nicely to where we're repaving South Water Street
Okay.
before we put the new parking spots in.
And the one-way's been implemented.
The one-way has been implemented.
And we
It's been
did-
milled, I think, and just we're waiting on weather to get it
And we
paved.
did a very, very preliminary design with Strand on Water Street. We just kind of dialed them back from that, said focus on parking first.
Mayor, can you summarize the financial commitment and maybe the change that you're just explain one more time, please?
Yeah, when we first talked about the three-phase TAP grant, we talked about phase one, including engineering, all the engineering for the entire project.
Right.
From here all the way out to where we want sidewalks. And then taking what funds were left and making as much as we could do downtown on phase one. Given some funding concerns for future cycles, the cabinet thought that it would be smarter for us to spend all of our money on phase one, engineer phase one.
Right.
And then take the balance of the funding, which we think will be around $575,000 to $580,000, and actually implement some of the changes that you've seen pictures of.
Okay.
I still think we have an obligation to engineer sidewalks out West Main so that we know what that looks like and we know what the cost is.
Yeah.
And then I think we're also in a better shape where the cabinet has said, in a natural sequence of things, they believe the sidewalks need to be done as a part of a larger road project. If we've got the engineering done, I think we're in a lot better place to advocate for that, either with a road project or without.
Okay.
But for phase one of the TAP grant, this was the cabinet's recommendation, and we brought it to you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Did we not originally, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been talking about this for 2 years, did we not originally talk about a $600,000 TAP grant with a match of $250,000 from us?
No, it was a $600,000 TAP grant with a $150,000 grant from us.
Okay.
So operating from a total of $750,000.
Okay.
And then backing out these engineering costs for what might be available to us to make
Okay.
improvements.
So we think we can get most of this done for that amount of money?
We think we can get a long way toward it.
I think the big unknown is the work that'll have to be done to shore up the viaduct.
Yeah.
Right.
All the
right.
pretty things that you see.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a problem.
Well, this
Well,
looks
those
so
would be
nice compared to like, we're talking about East Main Street extended for the schools.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of glamour
Is-
so far that we're aware of anyway.
Is the end of that about where the old water company building is?
About right, yeah.
Is that about right? I'm trying to visualize.
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah,
That helps me.
Just past.
right now.
Okay. Right at it, okay.
It's pretty.
So, that is our recommendation, and if there's a motion to approve this municipal order.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion, thank you.
I'll second.
Millie.
I'll take Millis.
Thank you.
That project was kind of her baby. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, under city attorney, is a municipal order approving a contract with a company called Solidarity.
Solarity. There are two
like-
gentlemen back here.
I like solidarity.
Instead of
But that's okay, you can call yourselves whatever you want. We can get into a lot of detail with council on this, and our guests can answer a lot of details, but basically, we are at the point where we need professional assistance in our continued effort to implement city works. That's been a very complex effort, and we are not getting all of the advantage from this very powerful software that we can receive. And we need some experts to help us do this. One thing that just an obvious thing as I read through the scope of work, we've got to be able to have our departments be able to use CityWorks, but also have access to all the legacy data in their current systems. And that is something we have not achieved yet. There's a lot of stuff that we need help with. So we have this three-phase contract with Solarity in the amount of $38,000, is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
What's it in the budget, Mayor?
36,400.
Thank you. Actually, Karen, what we've indicated in the MO is that it will be a part of the budget amendment that we bring you in January. We think it's essential that we do this. And I
Mayor,
would-
if that's your strong recommendation, I'll make a motion for approval.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Second, thank you. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Gentlemen, thank you for staying for the civics lesson. Sorry we didn't need you, but we do look, this is a very significant effort that we're committed to make work. So glad to have you on board to help us do that. All right. Item C on the agenda is a municipal order approving a contract for CDBG administration. As you all know, we've got an application in. Chris Lowry has done the work so far, and we don't know if we're going to get the grant yet, but it's been strongly advised that we go ahead and have our administrator on board so that if we are successful, our administrator can immediately respond. This is a contract for Ms. Lowry, two different amounts, $45,000 for a grant administration and 13,000 for AHTF administration.
Yeah, remember we got 2 grants, so the second grant that we got would actually be the match.
Is our match.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
and all of that administrative cost will be paid out of those grants, so if we get it, it's no cost to the city. The reason we do it now is that's the way you get to pay for it, is that you've already acquired it and made it part of the grant in advance.
So no money's paid out unless we officially get the grant.
Exactly, exactly.
Alright.
We've paid what we're gonna pay, assuming.
And when we get the grant, that's paid from the grant, is what you're saying? Okay, all right, I'm good.
Okay. There a motion to approve that?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
And a second. Yeah, if there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I hope the next one goes that easily. It's got a few more zeros involved.
Yes, it does.
My friends from Tusa are here. We do have, I need to find this because I want to go over the numbers with you. Thank you. We have a 3-part change order to bring to you tonight that has to do with our 911 project. 2 of which are very easy to understand, and I think we can go through pretty quickly. And then we want you to understand change order number 3, which is a much more significant cost.
Four.
Got 4,
Well,
but
four
one of
is
them's
a-
called 5.
Well, 4 is a time-only change order, which we will deal with. So we got,
Okay.
sorry.
Just to run through, change order number 1, the water company has asked that as we use their tower, we enclose some wire and conduit. That seems to be a reasonable request, and that's been costed out. It was not in the original proposal. Change 2, which covers a Sadieville tower site. The site has been evaluated and it is structurally sound, but we need to remove a couple of the big arms,
Horns, they call them.
horns on the tower to reduce weight so we can put our equipment back on and be within weight limits.
It fails structure otherwise.
So the structure, this makes the structure work for us if we remove those horns. And that is a fairly costly change order, $64,000. Let me jump down to number 5 and we'll come back to the big one. Number 5 is simply relocating our antenna and equipment on the Georgetown Municipal water tower down there. It's their tower and we want to use it in the best way we can. Change order 3 has taken a lot of research and a lot of discussion, but it's very simple and straightforward. Our proposals had one of our tower sites, a Crown Castle Tower, was one of the key tower locations in our configuration. It carries a pretty substantial lease. I think maybe it starts off at $2,500 and
30,000.
You get 3.
30,000
A year, sorry, yeah, 25 a month.
30,000 a year, and it increases by 3% every year. We've run a spreadsheet to show what those costs will be, since they're perpetual cost and they're perpetually increasing cost. And they got to staggering numbers pretty quickly. Over the cost of, over the 50-year lifespan of this asset, the lease cost could get up into the
$3.2 million.
$3.2 million range.
Who's counting though?
We can actually build a tower, and that's what this change order is about, in the amount of $441,358, and avoid those costs. Stacy has done the spreadsheets, and she thinks that somewhere around year 13, we've recovered all of our investment, and we save from that point forward. So from a cost analysis, it seems real clear what we should do.
That's under the current negotiated contract. That's not that year 13 break even is not a made up number. I mean, that's what we're on the hook for if we go with a rental.
With Crown.
Yeah.
So was that already in the works, in the proposal?
yeah.
So it's still an option.
It is. It's what we've negotiated, and we actually attempted very strongly to negotiate them down further, and
So that cost comes out and gets replaced with another cost, right? So this is the net new cost?
well, what we're saying is that,
You see what I'm
correct.
saying?
Well, I mean, it was included, the lease
Right.
was
So there needs to be a
included.
credit for that.
That's technically, is that correct, or?
But you're really replacing operational costs with capital costs. So the operational cost would have been a $2,500 a year lease,
Right.
$2,500 a month.
Right, right, right.
Versus we priced the tower in the contract as an option
And he and
to,
him-
if the lease cost was
He and
too
him
much.
here.
But you've got a really good point, because when we approved it,
Right.
we approved the construction cost, and we approved 15 years worth of maintenance
Right.
cost too, so really we're just swapping the two. It's,
Yeah, I mean, that cost needs to
Technically
get
not
credited, I would
not even
think.
an
I don't
increase.
understand all the nuances of it, but I would think a credit of some sort needs to be in play.
Well, what you're talking about, Councilman, is you're not gonna pay rent now, so you're gonna go ahead and invest
Right.
in the tower. You have the opportunities to be a tower owner.
Right, right.
Have costs now and make money
Right.
instead of paying somebody else rent.
I got it, but from our budget perspective, somewhere there needs to be a negative number coming back this way.
You're absolutely correct. When, like I said, the MO where we approved it did have that 15 years worth of maintenance
Yeah.
listed, so that would come off of that maintenance.
So if you really want to look at it, I mean, I could be off here, but instead of there being a $400 and some thousand cost, there'd be a much bigger number that's to the positive.
I think you're right. And
So who owns the land where we're proposing to put the,
well, that's the next part. We've negotiated essentially a 99-year dollar lease with a gentleman who owns a piece of property that would be suitable. And his ask in return is 10% of any profit that we would get off the tower.
did you say $1 a year?
Dollar for 99 years.
And he wants 10% of any additional tower revenue that comes on that
Which
tower.
we think, we calculated at, if we had 2 rentals on the tower, what did we calculate that at?
Well, typical for cellular space is around $2,500, just like they were looking to charge us.
Yeah, so $250 a month for him,
250.
or $500, or whatever, how many.
And he requested, although he did not insist upon, $100 a month for ground maintenance. So he would essentially go and mow and weed eat around the tower, but isn't consistent upon that. Those are the essential terms of what we have negotiated.
Did we
on the
try to buy the
tower.
land? I'm just curious.
Did. Wasn't interested,
Wasn't interested.
no.
And I guess that was the best, and maybe, I don't want to say the only option, but the best option.
The folks from Tucson and AMK looked at a whole bunch of sites. All of them had what I'll call logistical issues. And most of those issues related to terrain
Mhm.
or to location,
Sure.
to access.
Right,
Was
off of a road in a rural
access
area.
off the road. Already, we know we have to do, and it's included in the cost here, but a substantial portion of the cost is improving the road so we can get large equipment on it.
Okay. Sometimes people will take a deal like that and they'll sell it. So maybe we get first right of refusal if you haven't already negotiated.
Probably.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, if that's that big of a deal, $1 a year or whatever's.
I mean, it would be a locked-in lease for 100 years, basically. I mean, it couldn't be sold. It would be, just like if you
Yeah.
owned a piece of property and you're gonna rent it to a cell tower, they're gonna build on it, you can't sell that property.
No, but you can sell the,
You can sell the
Sell the
rights.
lease.
That's
but-
right.
Yeah, but you can't sell the use.
yeah.
I've encouraged our folks to not count on any revenue. It may or may not happen, but I just don't think we ought to base our
But,
decision on it.
but that would be another positive.
It.
to
I
offset
hope it
this.
happens.
Yeah.
But
The big condos, the big condos, right?
I just didn't want to count on
Yeah,
it
well,
as a
sometimes,
part of
yeah.
this. Bring you the worst case scenario, and then if we get something good,
Yeah.
but not count on.
Well, the savings in the rent justifies the capital expenditure on its own,
Yeah, but can,
as long as we make sure we get that credit on the rent for the
Yeah.
maintenance.
Oh, absolutely. They're certainly not gonna do both.
so Andrew, I'm just asking this, maybe our consultant can advise us. Would this location be conducive to any other users that might want a tower? Or would there be another location, that area, that would be more conducive and still take care of our needs as well? And you know where I'm going.
You can,
Say that again, sir, just so I understand.
Would there be another location in that general area that would be conducive for another potential user to go on a tower, where this specific location may not be quite as conducive?
This location was chose for a lot of reasons. The primary one that we look at is it will still give the coverage that public safety needs. So, for instance, when you've got Frogtown as the primary location, we usually look at a search area around that, usually not to exceed 1 mile to 2 miles, worst case. So this still allowed for the coverage to take care of public safety at really the best, what I'm gonna say, the best overall cost.
Okay, but would it be conducive for any other users?
Yes.
You can see a demand.
cell users.
Yeah, it's not far
wireless
from the
internet.
interstate, so cellular definitely, potentially the state, because they're looking at their new radio system, so there's a potential share or use with them. So yes.
Is there a certain height? I mean, I know that's that's very important to not only us, but to other users as well. Can we look at the height of?
It's 200, we're looking at 250 feet?
260.
260.
260 again to keep the coverage that was needed. Typically cellular along the interstate is going to look at anywhere from the 80 to 120 mark. And they go off of rad centers, so typically every 20 feet is a rad center. So that would offer at least 3 rad centers for cellular or other purpose, and then still keep the space there for you and potentially the state in the future as well.
And then other cell companies as well?
Well, that's when I talk about that rad center, that could be 3 carriers, 3 cell companies that could lease space. You're a tower owner, no different than the Crown Castle was going to be a tower owner to you.
But I don't know what the competition is in that area either, you know, I mean, they might already well.
Primarily Crown Castle was the only one close.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, when I say competition is like if we own a tower and somebody else owns a tower, we're kind of competing to try to get the.
I think that's what he's saying, is Crown Castle's the only one that's,
Yeah.
Crown Castle, the one we were going to rent from, is the only one
Right.
that's close in the area right
Correct.
now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You know what I'm getting at though? You understand what I'm getting at?
I think so. But why did you just say it?
Well, I'm trying to say.
Is there a different location where we can have a better opportunity to profit? Or is this the best location we can get?
Yeah.
I think for
That
both,
was
Mayor,
it.
I think the answer to that
I
question,
knew
yes.
exactly where you were.
Yes.
Explain very well sometimes.
There is.
No, the answer to the mayor's question is this is probably the primary spot that serves both purposes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, good.
I knew where you were going.
All right.
Thank you.
And, you know, and I'm just trying to think ahead sometimes, you know, which we all try to do. So what do you need, Mayor?
Motion for approval of municipal order,
5 change orders.
5 change orders.
Well, yeah.
4.
4 is a, we're not there yet, but 4 will be a time-only change order to accommodate the fact that these changes are going to push the schedule out.
I'll make a motion for approval with the understanding that that credit that was brought up would be somehow applied somewhere. You and the mayor would fully understand that.
I'll second it.
I think that's a good motion. Is that the way you second it, Chuck?
Who seconded it?
It's good enough, huh? If there are no more questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Done. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry to keep you so long tonight.
That's all right.
Short conversation. The next 2 items on the agenda both have to do with the same piece of property. Mr. Thompson is the sponsor. We're going to do one after the other. We're going to do a zone change ordinance and an annexation ordinance. And this is the property directly across the street from Kroger. The Ball Home subdivision has been referred positively from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I believe Mr. Nick Nicholson is here representing the owners.
For the record, Nick Nicholson here on behalf of Ball Homes. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. This is a very straightforward zone change. That's why it had staff approval and also a positive recommendation from the Planning Commission. But any specific questions you all may have, I'm happy to
voted
answer.
6-2?
It was, yes.
What was the two descending?
I forget their names. There are two gentlemen that were on the left, and one indicated that he did not want any residential building to be built moving forward in Scott County.
Okay. Well, I can say I think we need houses.
Really?
I say we need houses,
It
but
was on
I'm
the
not
record.
thrilled with the amount of apartments because you almost have as many apartments as you do houses.
While there are, I think there's 150 proposed apartments. There
162, I think. No.
It was 162 single-family
160
houses.
140.
140.
Yeah,
Yeah, 140.
140, I think you said for the apartment.
So 140 units and 161 single-family houses. And if you look at the area of land, it is substantially single-family. The reason why the kind of apartments are kind of proposed in this is in order to provide a buffer from the intensity of McClellan Circle to that single-family kind of residential neighborhood.
How does that provide a buffer?
Having the apartments up front to basically block the light coming from Kroger's and also the sound of the kind of roadways. It would be similar to a landscaping buffer that would be a solid wall up front. That is
That
what.
I kind of don't agree with, just because apartments seem to lend itself to a different element than what the neighborhood is sometimes. And so Georgetown these days has a lot of apartments.
I very much understand. It is why you will see neighborhoods constructed this way, with the apartments kind of at the front of it, in order to basically be able to funnel a majority of the traffic right up front, but also to block the intensity to the single-family developments. This is kind of what the kind of new age concept of neighborhood developments is, when you are trying to blend a mix of residential types together. It is kind of, that's the stage. This also puts the single family closer to the greenbelt in order to use that more as an amenity for the neighborhoods and the walking trails as well.
And the price point of the houses you're going to be selling?
I do not have an exact number on that. We still have to get an actual development plan approved in order to basically show what the typical lot size is, what the exact numbers of the lot sizes are, and how the kind of connections to the greenbelt might impact those.
We had some, I'm sorry, we had some questions raised about the conservation district.
Yes.
I mean, I understand that in a C1 zone, you're essentially allowed to reforest that property, and it's already essentially a forested property. But
Yes.
the question becomes, what happens when that area gets overgrown or trees fall? Who is responsible for cleaning up those?
So we are still the property owner. The C1 area, to kind of paint the picture here, what this is there's 67 acres on this property. Just about 7 acres is remaining a conservation district because that is in the technical greenbelt area. That will remain in the county, but it is under private ownership. The 60-ish acres is the residential development. That would be the property that is annexed and brought into the city and zoned residential. In the conservation district, there are kind of set rules on what can and cannot occur with regards to how property is maintained. For example, you just can't take a giant lawnmower and just blow through the entire greenbelt. But it is the property owner's private obligation to maintain that property. Now, I know that there are long-term plans for either the County of Scott or the City of Georgetown to eventually build a kind of multi-use trail throughout the entire greenbelt area. I don't know if that would be involved with purchasing right-of-way in that area, or if it would just be, some type of, joint public-private partnership to build this area throughout the entire situation. But as it is now, today, that would be a privately owned property that must be maintained by the property owner. As developments go forward, they are put into HOA situations. Any type of greenway is owned by the HOA. In this situation, it likely would be kind of in joint with the apartment complex itself because they tend to have larger maintenance budgets. But we are well down the road for figuring out what the actual HOA would look like. But it is a private property obligation. The zone change.
That's something, Nick, that we'll really want to pin down. on
Absolutely.
the front end. We have numerous conservation zones in the city now where it's very uncertain who's supposed to maintain and who's responsible, and we
Sure.
have to get this one understood on the front end.
And the conservation is remaining in the county. That is not part of the property that is being annexed in.
And is that part in the floodplain?
It is.
Right along the creek.
Yeah.
There are kind of two fingers, so to speak, of the of this C1 property along the back, and then it also comes in up through the side of it as well.
Do you know, it looks like there's maybe 4 or 5 apartment buildings, is that?
And that
will
site
they-
plan
will they-
very much has
will
to be
they-
approved.
Will they mirror the other apartments that
Yes.
Ball has done there?
This is a continuation in the final phase of the Mark development. Would be basically functioning as one complex.
Because you'll have 2 entrances, and I guess the
Correct.
first entrance, the closest one to Kroger, is the existing entrance then,
Correct.
correct? And then the other entrance,
It's about, I think, 1,300 feet or so down the
okay.
road.
They'll look the same as the ones that are there
Yes.
currently.
Yes.
Nick, one question that I wanted to ask about, reading through the staff report, the traffic study portion.
Yes.
So EA Partners did a traffic study, and it was concluded that the proposed development will not have a detrimental impact to traffic operations at the intersection with Marketplace Circle, but the proposed development would impact the existing Hemingway Place southbound approach to the bypass.
That's correct.
Hemingway Place is already a beehive of activity. And I noticed that the following recommendations were made to mitigate the impact. And number 1 of those was provide 2 lanes exiting Hemingway Place and a minimum of 1 entering. But when I read the conditions for approval, I don't see that.
That will come with the approval of the preliminary development plan. So the zone change isn't basically based on that specific finding because that is a property improvement that's off-site. But Ball Homes is basically committing to pay for that improvement in order to better that intersection.
Okay.
We also are, proposing to work with the city in order to get that intersection lit as well. Whether the state will allow it, we're just not sure. But Ball Homes is committing to doing that off-site property improvements. There's just no way to basically condition the zone change on an off-property improvement, but that is part of the, that will be part of the finding when the preliminary development plan is approved through the Planning Commission.
Sounds good, thank you. If there are more questions for Mr. Nicholson, we can hear them, and we can have first reading, and we can collect questions for the next meeting.
Karen was asking about the lot sizes. I mean, I think I can kind of make out some of the sizes in there, but when I scroll in, it gets a little blurry. And I don't know if you all have it on your computer or paper, but you all have got the paper, probably even smaller to see, but you can tell some of them are in the 70s, and maybe some of them are wide. Some of them are certainly wider, and some of them might be a little narrower, if that's what you're asking.
What was the cost of the?
Because we actually, Georgetown needs housing. We need housing and development of housing. I'm just the apartments, and I hear from the constituents too, that they're not liking all the apartments that are coming up in Georgetown. And over time, all the apartments that are coming up, and the ones that you all have developed is very nice right now, but over time, sometimes they're not so. And a lot of
Right.
times that's where problems eventually over time come from because the quality of them changes. And that's just a concern now with so many that we're getting here. I would love to say yes on your subdivision and no for your apartments, but it didn't come that way. It's all or nothing. So
This is true.
that's kind of a problem I'll have to deal with.
We are dedicating 45 of the 60 acres to single family And so I think there's a substantial amount of single-family that is the clear driver of this portion.
It's gonna be a long drive of apartments, you know, I mean, they're,
Yes. And it's not, your apartments are nice. I'm not saying they're not pretty, but I think it's kind of nicer to look over into the subdivision as far as the landscape for the community, or the appeal for the community than looking over into the apartments, although your apartments are nice that are over there. But I just hear a lot of people will say, when are we ever going to stop with the apartments? And apparently we're not. We're going to continue, but we need the housing. We really need the housing for the community now. We're running out of it. You all know that.
Yes, very
You've
much
built
so.
quite a bit of it.
There's a reason why we are dealing with the demand that we are dealing with
Yes.
right now, and why we are feeling so comfortable to move into kind of this next phase.
Yes.
I've got a question.
Mhm.
There's a map, I don't know if you can make this out or not.
Yes.
What's the yellow line that goes on both, what's the yellow line?
That is the notification area. So I think it's either 300 or 500 feet from the property lines. Everyone has to receive a notification.
So the undeveloped area then that we're, is on the top side?
It's just the pink. So the pink is the area that's subject to the zone change.
No, I'm sorry, I apologize. The area that's going to, if this goes through, that will stay, that's not being brought in, that's gonna stay in the county.
Conservation
I see
district.
what you're saying.
Is it the area on the top?
It's not, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. It is basically a strip in the back and then a finger that comes up and kind of goes almost to the road right here. And that is just the 100-year floodplain line comes up there.
There's another,
I think
there's
better
another picture in there, if you'll keep scrolling, that is a little bit better of the conservation district. He doesn't have it. Again, could just be making that up.
I'm not sure if I see an aerial of it.
I got it.
You got one? Yeah.
Thank you.
It is that entire side area right up through here that comes in, that's Stain County.
Thank you.
The annexation, not the sign.
All right. There are no further questions for Mr. Nicholson. We'll have first reading.
An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property containing 59.83 acres located at or around the intersection of McCullen Circle and Lexington Road in Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky from A1 to R2. PUD. Summary. Amends the official Georgetown, Scott County zoning map to show a change in the zoning classification for certain real property consisting of 59.83 acres located at or around the intersection of McCullen Circle and Lexington Road in the city of Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky from A1 agricultural to R2 PUD, which amendment is contingent upon the passage of the ordinance annexing the property into the city limits, provides for severability, repeal of inconsistent ordinances, and effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324. Introduced and publicly read the first time November 12th, 2018.
Thank you. That will constitute first reading, and we would anticipate second reading and action on November 26th.
Right.
Next item on the agenda is related to this zone change. It is first reading of the annexation ordinance that is required for the zone change to happen.
An ordinance.
if we have a question, should we ask now or should we wait until after the reading?
Go ahead and ask.
Well, but if we don't annex the portion that's, I guess, going to be in the conservation area, then if there's an issue in the future, that really won't come to us then, will it? I mean, it won't be a city issue, it'll be a county issue.
Correct.
And I guess that's what you are thinking about.
The magistrate that called me today to ask me whose problem it would be.
Yeah.
I said, it'll be yours. Unless the HOA takes over the maintenance in perpetuity. It'll belong to the county.
Yeah.
I think.
And I'm happy to put it on the record that that is the way that Ball Homes always sets up the HOAs for the greenways. We want to maintain control just as much as the county does, because we want to be able to make sure that we solve the problem.
I assume the reason it's not being annexed just because the property tax situation?
It is not.
It's in the Greenbelt.
That's outside the urban service boundary.
We're not touching it because it's in the Greenbelt.
So part of the comprehensive plan, one of the main goals and objectives is for the Greenbelt to not be annexed, to remain county property.
Okay.
It was planning commission's
It's right
recommendation
along
that
the
it be.
green
Well, you know what I was thinking. Or maybe you don't. The property taxes, greenbelts are valuable. I'm kidding, Nick.
Oh, well, I got no problem.
All right, I'm sorry.
You're good. Go right ahead, Steph.
An ordinance annexing into the city of Georgetown certain real property containing 59.83 acres located at or around the intersection of McClellan Circle and Lexington Road in Scott County, Kentucky. Summary: 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owners in accordance with KRS 81A 412, 59.83 acres of property located at or around the intersection of McClellan Circle and Lexington Road in Scott County, Kentucky. 2. Provides for an effective date upon passage and publication. Publicly introduced and read for the first time November 12, 2018.
Thank you. And council will recall that typically annexation requires two different ordinances separated by 90 days. Since this is a consent annexation, it can be done in one ordinance, and we'll approve it immediately with the zone change.
Was there another 40 acres that we contended with not long ago that wasn't too far from this on the bypass?
The medical plaza, right? Wasn't that, didn't we actually rezone that within, I think it's been a couple of years though.
No, just recently, this year. Was there anything else that we
The only
got
other
with?
one that we struggled with was North 25.
Okay. I was thinking there was 40 acres, but maybe it was this one that was being discussed that was coming to us, and it's obviously more than 40 acres, but perhaps that was.
The two that we most anticipated were the graduated senior living community.
Right.
And then this one kind of.
Okay, all right. Nothing on out to the west. Okay.
Nothing that we know
All right,
of yet.
all right, good.
Yeah, still the city line right there.
Okay.
All right. Next item on the agenda, it started to come up under,
Thanks, Nick.
thank you, Nick, under public comments, but we went ahead and put it on the agenda to discuss the fence ordinance and where we find ourselves with this fence ordinance. And I think this is just an unhappy situation, and I don't know that there's many good answers to it.
You all got copies of my letter.
It's a shame that we didn't have him stay for this, because that was the gentleman that wanted to talk to you all about this. And I think just because of the conversation I've had with him, would you maybe want to talk to him first before you discuss this further?
Sure. I mean, I think that the only reason I put it on the agenda was because I know that you all have been contacted by numerous constituents.
Right.
And I'm assuming you all were leaning towards fixing what is an obvious error, at least moving forward. But before I did, I wanted to make sure.
We don't know exactly how to. We've got a little bit of a hornet's nest with what's already built, and it's not only built here. The same fence has been built in at least 8 other locations in Georgetown. So we thought
They just don't show up as much when they're not new, and new wood and everything makes it show up right.
We offered to mediate this thing as much as we could. We even offered to, just so you all know, we even offered to pay the cost to lower the fence from 8 feet to 6 feet.
So is that where we are? We're not going to allow the people that have the 8-foot fence to keep it in there?
Billy, the problem is we have conflicting ordinances. We have conflicting advice. What we know we need to do tonight, and the reason it's on your agenda, is we know we need to bring you an ordinance making it clear from this point forward that 6 feet is the limit.
Right.
What will be a difficult decision for council is what we decide to do about the 8-foot fences that exist.
Nothing we
And
can do about it, is there?
There,
According to Andrew's letter, the ordinance allowed the 8-foot is the one that stands.
I think there's real ambiguity, Chuck.
And I think there's a question, I'll be honest with you, I got the letter and, I'm really uncomfortable with Andrew already giving a opinion on the letter as strong as the opinion is from the attorney, not Andrew, but from the office of the attorney. That's pretty strong. And I think probably from some of the conversation I have heard that maybe you all need to have the conversation tomorrow with Mr. Moore. Is that right? Yeah, with Mr. Moore, have a conversation tomorrow about that and see if it is as strong and concrete as the letter seems to indicate. And you may, after the conversation tomorrow, you may come back and say, yeah, it's as strong as it was with the letter that I said, but.
We'll be glad to have the conversation with him. We've gotten his emails and
good.
we've gone through his logic, and we will be glad to meet with him.
Good. And then
I think Andrew's letter is still going to be what you're going to have to do.
it may be, but I agree we need to go ahead and fix the ordinance and put the language in there
Make it
so people can understand what the language is. But yeah, there's a problem on hand with.
Andrew, did you see the email I sent you today?
I did, David. I apologize. I didn't get
okay.
to it. And I've been thinking about it. One, I'm not sure. David's question was, is there some regulation that requires you to have a good neighbor fence? That's what they call it in common terms. That's where you build the boards to the outside so your neighbors all see a nice clean fence. I don't believe that is part of the code, like the building code. I don't think we have an ordinance that states that. I think a lot of cities do have it. But here's the observation that I had. Looking at the picture, they actually made a good neighbor fence on the sides. And the reason they didn't make a good neighbor fence in the back is because they butted up against the other fences. And how are you going to put the boards on the other side?
I get it.
But not completely, because there is a section of it.
There's a section,
that-
you are correct. So I guess theoretically, they could have done it, part of it, good neighbor fence, and the other part not.
A door or
A
something.
gate, a door. But
But if you have two back-to-back fences, both have good neighbor fences, somebody got to be real skinny to get those nails in.
yeah.
You just sit back. You know, you come back.
I mean, that is a solution, though. That is usually what's done. Is when I built a fence in Lexington, it was the same situation. So we backed the fence in 2 feet, and actually we'd get back behind there and mow. Put a gate in there, but.
And actually, when I did our fence in our backyard, I went to our neighbor that was behind us and said, do you mind if we use yours as a section of, because we were consistently the same size, if we use your fence as a section of our fence?
Share the
And
fence.
they were happy.
Mediation an option?
Do you know the parties?
Some of them, I don't know all of them, but.
I do want to
You
say
know
for
one
the
of the
record,
parties.
we've had numerous conversations, but I'm happy to have more.
I did have a question, actually. One party called me today, one of the neighbors, and from what I understand, is the fence built on a property line? It's, because they had asked something about
I don't
fences
know.
being built inside a property line.
I don't know.
'Cause that's what I was told, that it was built on the property line, and that was their question, if in ordinances, we had them built a little in the property line, so.
You know, I don't know where, all these years, I've always thought the fence walls, you know, like you build with it, you don't build on the property line, you build over.
Yeah, that's what
You put
I had been-
the bad side versus the good side.
Yeah, that's
And
what I've
then,
been
of
told.
course, now, when I was mayor, I remember we talked a lot of times about where the fence stops at the, at the corner of
At
the
the
house
corner
and
of the
stuff.
house.
Yeah.
And now we have an ordinance on that, and we have that, I know, because that came up, is why we did fix that part of it, but, I'm thinking, where's all these things in my mind that's been here all these years, where did they come from? And there wasn't something that they came from.
I'm less familiar with planning, the subdivision and development regulations. There are some, obviously that's where the conflicting ordinance comes from, but I am not aware of any locally passed rules that say you have to have a good neighbor fence, or you have to put your fence in a certain distance from the property lines. I think those are common laws passed by other cities, other counties.
Okay.
But I don't think we have detailed ordinances on that front.
And quite honestly, it wouldn't make sense for, if there were two fences back to back, to both of them be good neighbor fences, then nobody's benefiting.
Oh, right. And that's just, like the mayor said, it's just not possible. I mean,
Yeah.
you could shadow box. That's what you do in that kind
Yeah,
of situation.
yeah.
Is you share the fence and shadow box it. So one on this side, one on this side, one on
Right.
this side, and it has the appearance of being a good neighbor fence if you're looking straight at it from either side. But that involves communication and foresight and planning and
In cooperation.
and that.
There's some folks being real rigid here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So
it's a tough situation.
it is. But I assume you all would like to see an ordinance that gives clarity on the
Yeah.
6
Yes.
foot
I think we
fence
need
and the
to.
city limits.
I think the citizens would like
to
to see that clarity as well
Yeah.
on that,
'Cause
to be honest with you.
We now know that we've got citizens out there that have acted in good faith and hired a commercial fence company acting on advice from our planning and zoning, and they've bought an 8-foot fence.
Why are they, just a question on that, why are we going through planning and zoning when that's not a planning and zoning issue? I realize it's a subdivision, but that's not a planning and zoning issue, that should be a building issue.
You got a good point. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be in the landscape and land use buffers ordinance, but 29 years ago, that's where it landed.
And how's the definition of buffer? Buffer, it's not a buffer.
It's just a generic term for that ordinance. I mean,
Because a buffer, you think of like Canes when they came to town and we had that issue with the people behind them. That was a buffer, that was the fence
Sure.
that should address that in that, but that subdivision really shouldn't be addressing this issue.
It's just
Our-
like we didn't have the ordinance for no barbed wire in town, and we had to develop one.
I'll tell you all right now, our subdivision and development and our landscape, land use buffers, and maybe even our zoning ordinances all need a thorough review.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
And that is something
Yes, they
that,
do.
And that's a mouthful.
yeah.
That's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
So
7 or 8 other people thought the same.
we're going to continue to hear from these folks. They're really unhappy, and we don't have a good answer. But we will start working on an ordinance for the future. Item H on your agenda is just a quick discussion with you on Creekside Elementary School and the new high school needing to be annexed.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, so, we've talked with the superintendent, and discussions are going on with the school board, and they are receptive to this. Clearly, it needs to happen for both schools. But we do have an odd form for consent annexation that the council adopted, I think, back in 2012. And it contains some language that we're not sure why it's in there, and the school board's attorney has said they're happy to do consent annexation, but some of the stuff in our form is really squirrely. So, and Andrew agrees that it needs to come out.
So we got, you all, as the mayor said, you all passed this by resolution back in 2012, a new consent form. I understand why paragraph 8 is in there, which I'll get to. Paragraph 4 basically says if you want to consent to be annexed into the city, you cannot subsequently ever sell or transfer your property without the city of Georgetown's permission.
That's illegal, isn't it?
I think so. It's the first time that's been pointed out to me, but that doesn't sound
Why
right.
would we want to do that?
Not only do you have to notify, I can understand notification, but it says, shall not transfer the property until the transferee executes a similar document which releases the above parties and any and all liabilities. So in other words, you can't sell it unless you also get that future owner to essentially agree to the same terms and conditions, which I think is, I mean,
nobody is gonna accept that in a deed to property.
Well, the school
Schools
board's
might,
point
that's
is
for
they
sure.
can't accept that. There's a
Right.
statute that says we have to take title to property free and clear of restrictions. So I get that. I think the paragraph could be worded better to say, and that the point of having this document is to say, one, you're complying with the statute of consent, but two, you also understand that you're doing so, here are all the things that come along with that. You know, you're agreeing to abide by the city of Georgetown's ordinances. You're gonna have, municipal sewer and water service. But otherwise, binding the land and binding future owners, I don't know what there is to bind them to. I mean, it's a consent to become part of the city, and that can't be undone by statute. So I think that should go away. And then the other paragraph is a oddly worded way of saying, if you fill out this form without first putting in the description of land, you agree that whatever that description is good later on. Which is,
It won't be
we just put the description in from day one, we always have. We don't let them sign it unless they first typed in the full legal description and then signed it. So I think that just needs to go away. Otherwise, we keep it exactly the same.
Was it originally done as an ordinance or a
Resolution.
resolution?
Let me double check. I think it was a resolution. I'm positive it was not an ordinance. I was just.
So if it was a resolution, we could make these changes by voice vote.
I would have
Yeah.
to voice vote it, even if it's a
What about a
municipal
municipal
order.
order?
Even if it's a municipal order, I'd,
We can do the same.
You just may not have it written, but we
I don't know, I'm just asking.
If it was done by ordinance, I'll sponsor the changes.
okay. Let's see, quick here. I apologize, I had that, but.
You wanna think about it, Andrew, and just,
Yeah, if you'll give me just maybe 30 seconds.
well, we can't do anything tonight anyway.
No,
Well, if you pass a voice vote to authorize me to use that form, what the school board would like to do is, on the 20th of this month, sign it without those two paragraphs in it. And then we can come back and you can actually do the actual annexation ordinances.
if the school board's willing to sign consent to annex, in November, I'm willing to get it to them
Yeah.
as quick as they're willing to sign it. So
Yeah.
if we can do this by voice vote and
Yeah.
fix this form tonight, it actually fits our purposes.
He did it by municipal order at 12/006. So I guess what I would ask you to do is tonight voice vote and say you authorize for the two annexations with the school, and then and the next time I will actually bring you back the full revised consent form, and then you can pass that by subsequent MO.
It's fine with me.
Carrie made the motion, I'll make a second.
that's fine.
Great. Everybody understand what we're doing?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. We'll get these two schools annexed.
Mhm.
And the quicker we get them annexed, it kind of, I told staff today, it reminded me back of when we got Toyota annexed by consent. So we saved 90 days, and Toyota had 3,000 construction
Right.
workers on
That's
site.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And getting them annexed 90 days earlier, we collected an extra $150,000 in payroll tax.
That's right.
So if these schools are under construction and we get them annexed,
Right.
Yeah.
there's immediate
Exactly,
revenue.
yeah.
Under city engineer portion of the agenda, pretty straightforward. We've been working on getting streets accepted into the network, and many of them are very, very old. Eddie's been working through this pretty diligently. We've got two municipal orders. One approves street dedication in the Enclave, and the other one approves street dedication in the Colony. Both are real straightforward. Can they be taken together,
Mhm.
resolutions?
They're municipal orders, but I don't see
Municipal
why you
orders.
couldn't pass them together.
If there are no questions, I'd be glad. to hear a motion to approve both municipal orders on street dedications.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Under Fire Department, Chief, you've got some items to declare surplus, some fire hose and.
Hydraulic hose, rectification equipment, oil burner that we used to keep the shop out back in Station Bridge.
And they would just sell those through your
Public surplus.
public, okay,
Motion.
thank you.
Second. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. And under the police department, Chief Bossy would like to order some laptop mounts.
Motion.
Thank you.
Karen's hungry.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, that concludes my portion of the agenda. Mark, do you have anything tonight? Chuck?
No?
Okay.
Well, two of the folks that contacted me came tonight, that was fabulous that they actually came to city council. One, the driveway into Cardone that goes back to the senior citizens. Everybody's complaining about bumps and
Yes,
holes.
they are. And they need to call the church.
That's what I told them. All right, just want to double check. Told them that's what it was. All right, and then the other is this East Main Street Extended area where they are doing, still building some houses, but I think it's about cleared. It's over there where we're doing the road and going to that part of the subdivision. This citizen that lives over there has complained that the debris on the sidewalks, that maybe we made them do it over or something, they didn't do it 80.
Oh, and they left all their mess behind?
And they left all their mess, and they said, so when they walk, they have to walk out in the street and then go way down and then walk back up.
Do you know what address or street that is?
It's CASTNEL Court. But it's up in that area. I told him I would bring it up and let the city engineer look and see, because he said it's just kind of left.
Like code enforcement to me.
Oh, okay, but he's just left a mess.
Do we have enough of it?
Yeah, we're fine. It's off East Main.
Yes,
Sounds good. Anything else?
that's it.
Holly?
Nothing.
Well, all right, if there's nothing else to come before the council, we'll stand adjourned. Hey, I said 2.5 to 3 hours.
I missed that part.